Throughout Senator McCain's distinguished career of public service, one theme resounds loudly: the importance of fidelity to the values of individual rights and human dignity, and the conviction that this is what makes our country great. Senator McCain's accomplishments and accolades are far too numerous to mention here. Ranking member of the Armed Services Committee and a consummate legislator, he has led on a wide range of human rights issues, most recently, just yesterday, on the Disabilities Treaty, which sadly went down in defeat. But I can say with confidence and only a little bit of bias that nothing he's achieved has been more significant to our community and to our nation than his heroic work opposing torture. Because of his moral authority born in personal experience as a prisoner of war, because of his impeccable national security credentials, because perhaps above all of his doggedness in engaging on this issue again and again and again, Senator McCain has persuaded people who would not have otherwise been persuaded. He fundamentally changed the debate about torture in this country from one about fear to one about values. Human Rights First has been fortunate to have a long and productive relationship with Senator McCain. After the Abu Ghraib revelations, we formed an unprecedented anti-torture coalition of retired military leaders who, like Senator McCain, know firsthand that our ideals are national security assets that we disregard at our peril. The generals and admirals in this coalition backed Senator McCain's landmark effort in Congress to ban cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, which became known as the McCain Amendment. And thanks to his leadership, it passed the Senate 90-9. It was the first big move by our government to end torture. Both our military coalition and Senator McCain were pivotal in bringing about the second, President Obama's executive order banning torture. I wish I could say that the story about torture ends there, but this is an ongoing struggle. There are some who would have us go back to those policies, and there is still a disturbing level of support for torture in our country, which is one of the many reasons why we need Senator McCain's leadership. When, for example, people falsely claimed that torture had led the United States to bin Laden, it was Senator McCain who took to the Senate floor and to the Washington Post to debunk the claim and educate the American people. On this issue and so many others, no one can do what John McCain does. His leadership is indispensable. Human rights, as you all know, needs a fighter, and John McCain is a fighter, and we're deeply, deeply grateful for it. Thank you so much. Welcome, John McCain.
Thank you, Elisa, for that kind introduction, and it's far different from the one I received at the Scottsdale Rotary Club, where the guy said, "Here's the latest dope from Washington, Senator John McCain." So thank you, Elisa, for that. In case you missed it, the approval rating of Congress is now up to a rousing 11%, ranking just below above car salespeople, whom I've always admired. And I always am looking for someone in that 11% who approve of Congress. I'd like to meet one. We're down to paid staffers and blood relatives. But I'd also like to ask one of those in that 11% approval rating, what the hell is it they like about us? But anyway, Lisa, I thank you for your kind introduction, for your excellent leadership of Human Rights First, an organization that is very, very close to my heart. I will never forget the role that Human Rights First, and Elisa in particular, played in the fight to end the cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment of detainees during the previous administration. You were indispensable, especially the way that you organized the coalition of retired military leaders to support our efforts to stop torture. We couldn't have won that fight without you, and Elisa and Human Rights First will always have my gratitude and support. And as Elisa said, the fight is not over. The fight is not over. There are still people that have watched 24 and Jack Bauer enough that they believe that we need to torture people. I'm a great admirer of Jack Bauer's, but anyway, that earlier struggle to do what was right demonstrates the essential role that people like you, concerned citizens and principled advocates of human rights, can play and have to play in our democracy. The great benefit of democracy is that it allows for self-correction. It allows imperfect human beings to strive, nevertheless, to live up to the high standards of our own values, which are perfect and eternal. that quest is more fully live. Our convictions does not happen by itself. It happens because of you. It happens because you stand up for what's right, even when doing so is unpopular and when others are afraid to act. I don't need to convince you as to why America's leadership on human rights is so important. You know why. You know why. You know that what makes America unique among the nations of the world is not simply a dedication to human rights. Many nations are also dedicated. Nor is it simply our great power. Many other nations are also powerful. No, what makes America unique is that at our best, we marry our power and our values together and to seek to make the world better. Not perfect, but better. What makes America so special is that in the final calculation, our interests are our values, and our values are our interests. You know this. You also know that there will be times when we in America will come up short of our own high standards. After all, the United States government has responsibilities that non-governmental organizations don't have. And at times, those duties and the constraints they impose create times of tensions between our interests and our values. It doesn't mean that our values are flawed. It only means that we are. And that makes your passionate pursuit of human rights all the more important. That's why we in government need groups like yours. You are the conscience of our country. You don't need me to convince you of any of this, and that's why I'm here today. I want to leave you instead with a different message, which is this. Now, more than ever, we need you. America needs you. I need you. We need you to be our moral compass. We need you to remind our country, our fellow citizens, and our elected leaders why America's support for human rights in the world is so essential, not just for the sake of our values and all who share them and aspire to them, but ultimately for the sake of our own national interests. You and I know that American people are focused right now on our own serious domestic and economic challenges, and there's good reason for that. We also know that Americans are weary of war and other international commitments. More broadly, there's good reason for that too. But we cannot allow this rightful desire to prioritize our own domestic challenges to come at the expense of meeting our unique responsibilities of world leadership, especially our support for the values of human rights, rule of law, and democracy. This is not a partisan concern. It extends equally to both parties. On the one hand, I am concerned by this administration's reluctance to lead more confidently and more actively on matters of human rights in our foreign policy. I am concerned that the administration appears ready to continue its rush to exits in Afghanistan and what a precipitous withdrawal of U.S. forces could mean for the most vulnerable members of Afghan society, especially women and girls. I'm concerned that in Libya, we appear once again to have won the war, but are at risk of losing the peace. Many brave Libyans who want rule of law and democratic institutions are being assassinated every day. Large parts of the country have been overrun by militias and extremist groups, and yet the administration has continually fallen short in providing the Libyan people and their fledgling government with the U.S. support that they have requested to help them care for their wounded warriors, expand the rule of law, and train national security forces. And then there is Syria, a savage and unfair fight that has raged on now for nearly 2 years at the cost of 40,000 lives. The president himself has said that the violence must end and that Assad must leave power. That was 15 months ago. The administration's own policy, as stated in Presidential Study Directive 10, is that, quote, preventing mass atrocities and genocide is a core national security interest and a core moral responsibility of the United States. How can those words mean anything when 40,000 men, women, and children have been slaughtered in Syria. What's worse, the President yet again this week warned Assad that the use of chemical or biological weapons would change his calculation on intervention. This was meant as a red line. It will be taken as a green light. I assure you that the message was not lost on Assad or anyone else in Syria for that matter, that as long as Assad does not employ weapons of mass destruction, he can do anything else. Bomb civilians with fighter jets and attack helicopters. He can massacre them with militias, shell their homes with tanks and artillery, detain and disappear and torture them, and the United States of America will do nothing to stop it. I wish I could say that my own party was offering a better alternative to these and other policies. I wish I could say that Republicans were providing moral leadership in the world where the administration is not. But sadly, in so many instances, we are not. There have always been strains within the Republican Party between the internationalists and the more isolationist voices, between those who want to put our values at the front of our engagement in the world and those who do not. This battle for the heart and future of the Republican Party is being joined once again. And I will admit, internationalists like me have our work cut out for us. Yesterday was an instructive example. As you know, Senate Republicans voted down the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. I understand and respect my colleagues' concerns for American sovereignty and the primacy of our laws. But if ever there was a treaty that's tailor-made for the advocates of American sovereignty, it was the Disabilities Convention. The treaty would not constrain American sovereignty, it would expand it. It would extend the protection of human rights on which America has proudly led the world for decades. It would demand that the world be more like America. And yet, on the basis of outright falsehoods and fear-mongering, the treaty was voted down. All of us, Democrats and Republicans alike, need to do better, and we cannot afford not to. I continue to believe that in our world, we are experiencing a period of upheaval unlike anything we have seen in a generation or more. And at the root of it is the great global awakening on the part of millions and millions of people who want what we too often take for granted: the security that comes with the rule of law, the peace that comes with free and tolerant societies, and the dignity that comes with opportunity, the protections for human rights that come with democracy. We see this longing for human rights today all across the Middle East and North Africa, where people who had been written off by so many for so long as somehow incapable of living in freedom are demanding the right to do just that. We see this longing for human rights in Burma, where a surprising and remarkable, though still incomplete, journey to a more democratic future has begun. We see this longing for human rights in Russia, where pressure is building for change and decent governance. With every action the government takes to clamp the lid down harder and more ruthlessly, that pressure only builds further. We see this longing for human rights in China, where it's simply not possible for a country of 1.3 billion talented and increasingly empowered citizens to continue to be ruled by 7 old men who meet once a year in a seaside resort. In all of these places and many more, there's not just a longing for human rights, there is also a longing for American leadership on behalf of them. Whether it is the young people in Tahrir Square, concerned about what the draft constitution will mean for women and minorities, or ethnic communities in Burma who want to be citizens of the country they still love, or Tibetans in China who feel the only expression of dissent they have left is gasoline and a match. All of these groups and more do not want less American leadership on their behalf. They want more. They want more consistent, more outspoken, more principled American leadership in support of our shared universal values of freedom and human rights. And this is where you come in. You need to help our political parties, our leadership, and our country to do better. You need to remind our leaders how much is at stake in the world. You need to carry the lonely and whispered voices of hope and dissent and protest from all over the world and bring them into our offices, into the halls of our government, so that we, your elected leaders, can make them more a part of our foreign policy. You need to demand more of us, Democrats and Republicans, Congress and the administration, and remind us constantly that if America does not speak up for the values we hold dear, it will not simply be a betrayal of who we are and what we stand for. It will ultimately make the world a poorer, darker, and more dangerous place for all of us. This is my charge to you, my challenge, and I know you can rise to it, just as you have risen to similar challenges in the past. Our country needs you now more than ever if we are to remain the proud and confident leader of the free world on matters of human rights, a cause that we lead by the power of our examples, yes, but also through our actions, our advocacy, our impatient pursuit of a better world. That is America at its best. That is the moral leadership that I know America is still capable of. And that's why I'm so grateful for your continued dedication to this just cause, which is greater and more enduring than all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that charge, and we are fired up. Thanks. Senator McCain has graciously agreed to stay for a few minutes to have a discussion with us, and there are microphones around the room. Raise your hand and shake it if I don't see you, and we will get started. And I have a few questions of my own, too. So, yes, right here in the front. Yes, please. Yes, wait for the mic. And it's hustling to you right now.
Hussein Abdullah with the Americans for Democracy and Human Rights in Bahrain. Senator McCain, thank you for your leadership in human rights. And I think we all understand very well it comes from, you know what does it mean to be tortured. I think probably you're one of few in this room who knows what does that mean. Bahrain. Are we going to see Senator McCain's leadership when it comes to Bahrain? I think as an ally, we have given them a lot of pass. As we meeting today, torture is still happening in Bahrain. And I think this administration need a push from a leadership in human rights in the Senate. And I think we all know when you spoke in Libya what happened, and you're still pushing this administration on Syria. As a Bahraini American, my question is, are we going to see your leadership when it comes to human rights violations in Bahrain? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. As a matter of fact, this weekend I'm going to Bahrain, where I intend to raise these issues with the leadership. By the way, I guess I'm not supposed to say my travel plans, but anyway, if I'm assassinated, it's your fault. And I think you raise a very legitimate concern. I would like, and this is why we have to have more of a dialogue on the issue of Bahrain. I think we also know there are other influences that are part of that has made Bahrain a battleground for Saudi versus Iran, Shia, Sunni, a number of other complexities of this issue that have made it a more complex and difficult issue. But I don't think there's any doubt that no country can continue to abuse people's human rights and maintain the support of its people. But I think you would agree, and by the way, I'd be glad to hear your response if you want to, that there are some complications to this issue which make it not exactly a pure issue of human rights. You, go ahead, because you are. Go ahead.
I think you're relating to Iran. There was a report commissioned almost a year ago, and we're living the anniversary of that report, called the BICI Commission, or the BICI report. In that report that was commissioned by the king himself and his government, the investigators clearly said that the uprising or the Arab Spring in Bahrain is basically native from the Bahrainis, and Iran did not play any role in it, or it's not behind it. However, is gonna be the beneficiary if this continues. That's the fear as a Bahraini American.
And there are more recent reports. Hold on to the microphone a second. And there are more recent report of more active Iranian involvement, I think you would agree, as happens with these conflicts when they drag on, as is happening in Syria with jihadists flooding into, and even al-Qaeda flooding into Syria. This is why there should be every effort to bring these conflicts to a close and obviously show more American leadership.
I cannot agree more. We need dialogue in Bahrain. We need the opposition, the peaceful opposition that's in prison. We need them out, sitting on the table with the Bahraini government. But how can you start a dialogue when torture is still taking place and political opposition the leader? And there is no clear, strong message coming from the White House. They say we talk behind closed door. Well, we don't know really what they talk about. I guess not working for a year, so we need a change in policy in Bahrain.
I'm sorry, my friends, to have this issue kind of dominate our conversation, but I think it is a classic example of the challenges that we face in our pursuit of human rights, and that at the end of the day, we better stand up for what we believe in. Thank you.
Thank you. Right over here.
Thank you very much. James Denslow from Crisis Action. I just wondered, on the point on Syria, lots happening on the ground very quickly. You talked about sort of the problems the administration's had in 15 months of calling for leadership change, but no leadership change in Syria. If you were president today, can I push you on particularly what you would do right now to address the situation there? Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for asking me if I were president today. After I've told Elisa, after I lost, I slept like a baby. Sleep 2 hours, wake up and cry. Sleep 2 hours. I would have long ago said, here's a no-fly zone. And that no-fly zone would not have to be enforced with American air power, nor would American boots on the ground be any consideration. You could put Patriot missiles or other missiles to defend a no-fly zone and start getting the arms and equipment to the people that you could identify in that no-fly zone. This is what they need, is a Benghazi, an area where they can organize, where we could work with them, where we could weed out the jihadists and support the advocates of democracy. And I could go along for 15 minutes, but I'd just like to say, you remember the non-interventionists that warned that if we intervened, all these bad things would happen. Well, we didn't intervene, and look what's happened. And so all I can say is that I would have established that no-fly zone. I would not have had American boots on the ground. I would have not attacked the air defenses around Damascus. I would have simply made that protected. And believe me, you shoot down one Syrian airplane that came into that no-fly zone, other pilots would not fly into it. So the bloodletting goes on and the difficulties go on. And now, my friends, as you know, the latest wrinkle are the published reports that Bashar Assad is now moving chemical weapons, including nerve gas, into position. These are published reports, not intelligence reports, published reports into position where they might be used as a desperate measure on his part. God knows that the genocide that would take place if you use those weapons in a populated area.
We could go on a long time.
Yeah, sorry for
high
the
sign.
sorry for, I will make a short answer, I promise. The next one.
Okay.
Make it a simple question.
I hear you back. Simple question, quick answer.
Good morning, Senator. My name is Scott Morgan. As a former Marine vet, I want to thank you for your service, sir. My question is, why has there been such a lack of engagement in this city regarding what's going on in the eastern DRC, whether it's holding Rwanda responsible, holding the inaction of the Kabila government for its inactions responsible? Why has there been just no conversation at all about this here in Washington?
I think it's because many people view these problems as insoluble, which is not correct. But I also think it's been going on and back and forth. You know, President Clinton said his greatest regret of his administration was not intervening to try to prevent the genocide that took place in Rwanda. There are potentially, I think you would agree, at least 4 or 5 places where an equal type of genocide could happen literally like that. My only answer is that the attention span of members of Congress and the administration, and second of all, a failure to see a way through these, particularly the Congo situation, which has been going on for many years. But what I greatly fear, and I know you do too from your comments, that maybe some time 5 years from now, oh gee, we wish we had done more. But finally, my comment has to be, this has to be an international effort. The United States of America cannot do this alone, but there's no reason why there shouldn't be an international effort and one that is effective.
Great. Well, we could keep you here a long time, but
One
your
more?
staff...
Could we do one more?
Of course we can. Right here up in the front. Wait for the microphone, please. It's right here.
Sharon Silber from Act for Sudan. I wanted your comment on the unfolding use of planes to prevent people from growing food and attacking civilians in the Nuba Mountains and the Blue Nile regions of Sudan. I wondered if you supported a no-fly zone there, and what should the U.S. response be to the weapons factory that Israel recently bombed but is now being rebuilt, according to news reports, in Sudan for Iran?
Well, you also know that the missiles that were launched out of Gaza came from, many of them came Iran through Sudan into Gaza. All I can say is that we have made several efforts concerning Sudan, the division of the country, a number of other efforts that have been made. The international effort has been weak. I appreciate the UN and I appreciate peacekeeping, but time after time we've seen that the UN is not very good at peacemaking. And that's why sometimes I think the answer is to get some kind of international force together rather than using the UN for missions that basically they're not, that's not why the UN was founded, and certainly not the way that it acts. I guess all I can say is that we need to care more about Africa, and there are, let me say, there has to be allegations anyway of some kind of racism by us not responding to these crises in Africa, because there's legitimate comments that say, well, if there's something like this happened in another part of the world, we'd all be heavily engaged. I hope that's not the case. I pray that's not the case, because that's not the way the world should act. But there's no doubt that we should, we absolutely should be more actively engaged. But also, finally, the complexities of these situations, when we get down to tribal rivalries and other things like that, make them extremely difficult. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try harder. The reason why I'm leaving now, I'm going over to the Pentagon and meet with some of the more senior people who have, strangely enough, have invited me there. I'm going to continue the discussion we're having with them about human rights and the changed world that we live in. And we need to talk, and Elise and I were just talking about, what about this use of drones? When is it right? When is it wrong? some of these decisions that are going to have to be made. Human rights. If we are truly going to stand up for people in the world, shouldn't we be the leader on human rights rather than the follower? And I just want to say that to all of you here, I thank you for what you do. Again, I want to assure you that your reward will be in heaven, not here on earth. And I'm very grateful for you, and I look forward to seeing all of you. Thank you very much.
See you there.